So as you all know, this beautiful blue-green planet, Earth, is the only planet in the universe that is known to support life. This unique planet is home to an extraordinary diversity of life, from giraffes to gorillas, from insects to bears. And it's interesting that people don't recognize, but humans actually share DNA, the basic building block of life, with all species, indicating that nature is a community to which we belong rather than a commodity intended for us to exploit. All human rights ultimately depend on a healthy biosphere. Without functioning ecosystems, which depend on healthy biodiversity, there would be no clean air to breathe, no safe water to drink, and no nutritious food to eat. A teaspoon of healthy soil contains billions of microorganisms, algae, bacteria, fungi, that feed plants and protect them from pests and pathogens. Healthy ecosystems provide a renewable supply of wood, fiber, food, fish, and other goods. And healthy ecosystems also regulate the Earth's climate, filter air and water, recycle nutrients, and mitigate the impacts of natural disasters. And yet, our activities are destroying biological diversity at a rate that is unprecedented in human history. Wildlife populations have fallen by approximately 68% since 1970. The rate of extinction is hundreds of times higher than the average over the past 10 million years and is accelerating. 1 million species are at risk of extinction, according to the Intergovernmental Science Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service. And the causes of this are clear. Since 1970, the human population has doubled, the global economy has quadrupled, and global trade has multiplied by a factor of 10, which has sent demand for materials and energy skyrocketing. So through all of these activities, we are literally eroding the very foundations of our health, our livelihoods, and our economies, with devastating consequences for human rights. Next slide. The COVID-19 pandemic actually provides a striking example of this. COVID-19 is the latest emerging infectious disease to spill over from other species into humans. And more than 70% of emerging infectious diseases in recent decades have had zoonotic origin, including HIV/AIDS, Ebola, Nipah virus, Marburg virus, and various strains of avian influenza. The growing risk of these diseases is caused by human activities that damage ecosystems, including deforestation, land use, land clearing and conversion for agriculture, the illegal wildlife trade, and intensified livestock production. States have created hundreds of treaties and declarations promising to protect nature, including the 1992 Convention on Biodiversity. Yet there's a huge implementation and enforcement gap. States failed to meet any of the 2010 nature targets and failed to meet any of the 2020 Aichi biodiversity targets. So states are not responding with appropriate urgency to the dire warnings issued by the world's leading scientists. On the contrary, states encourage damage to ecosystems and biodiversity by providing more than $500 billion annually in subsidies that harm nature, which is more than 5 times what states spend to protect biodiversity. So the degradation of ecosystems and the decline of biodiversity, as I mentioned earlier, have profound consequences for the enjoyment of human rights. Among the human rights threatened and violated include the rights to life, health, food, a healthy environment, water, an adequate standard of living, culture, indigenous peoples' rights, and the rights of the child. Communities protected by healthy mangrove ecosystems are less likely to suffer deaths caused by cyclones, which protects the right to life. Healthy ecosystems provide a buffer against emerging infectious diseases, safeguarding the rights to life and the right to health. Insects, bats, and birds pollinate more than 75% of crops, essential for fulfilling the right to food. The destruction of ecosystems and biodiversity violates the right to a healthy and sustainable environment. Because of their strong dependence on nature, indigenous peoples and local communities are disproportionately harmed by ecosystem degradation and biodiversity loss. However, indigenous peoples and local communities and peasants can make enormous contributions to conserving and sustainably using biodiversity when empowered to do so through recognition of their rights. So my report argues that states should apply a rights-based approach to all aspects of conserving, protecting, restoring, and using and benefiting from healthy ecosystems and biodiversity. Examples of the procedural obligations of states include providing the public with accessible information about the global nature crisis, ensuring inclusive, equitable, and gender-based approaches to public participation, protecting the environmental human rights offenders who are defending ecosystems from violence, harassment, and intimidation, and enabling affordable and timely access to justice and effective remedies for all to ensure accountability. When we turn to the substantive obligations, states must, for example, and there are more examples of this in my report, but states must monitor and report on the state of biodiversity, implement national biodiversity plans, create protected areas, and establish other effective conservation measures, enact and implement legislation to protect endangered species, and restore degraded ecosystems. With respect to Indigenous peoples, states must recognize their land titles, tenures, and rights, acknowledging the existence of different customs and governance systems, including collective ownership, and similar measures should be taken for local communities and peasants. Businesses and large conservation organizations must do more to respect human rights and do no harm in their work. As I do in all of my reports, I like to highlight good practices. And so there's an annex to my report on human rights in the healthy biosphere, which contains hundreds of inspiring examples of good practices in the conservation, protection, and sustainable use of biodiversity, including the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, led by Costa Rica and France, the European Green Deal, and the African Great Green Wall. In conclusion, my report provides detailed recommendation for states in 4 key and interrelated areas. We have to have a carbon neutral, nature positive economic recovery from the pandemic. We need urgent action to target the key drivers of these zoonotic diseases. We must accelerate action to protect and conserve nature. And we must respect the rights of Indigenous peoples, local communities, and peasants as we make progress in our conservation targets. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is not too late to respond to the global nature crisis, but time is running out. The ongoing failure to conserve, protect, and sustainably use the Earth's ecosystems exacerbates inequality and has catastrophic consequences for the enjoyment of human rights. Today, the world's leading scientists are all calling for rapid, systemic, and transformative changes to address the climate emergency, the nature crisis, and to avoid future pandemics. As my friend from Switzerland said, with COVID-19, humanity is paying a terrible price for ignoring the warnings of scientists. We must not make that mistake again. Employing a rights-based approach can serve as a catalyst for accelerated action to protect nature. History demonstrates, through the progress achieved by abolitionists, suffragettes, civil rights activists, and Indigenous peoples, the powerful role of human rights in sparking transformative societal changes. As I have said many times and will continue to say at every opportunity, the time is now for the United Nations to recognize, through resolutions at the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly, that the time has come to recognize the right of everyone, everywhere, to live in a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Thanks to all of you for everything you are doing to advance human rights and protect this miraculous, wonderful planet that we're also lucky to call home. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.